understand and heal from intergenerational trauma. I am your host, Kai Marie. To find out more information about the topics discussed today, visit kaimarie.com.
Let's try that again with a mic that's not muted. This is Kai Marie, and welcome to the Healing Element Podcast. So happy that you decided to join me this Tuesday evening. I have some very special guests with me here this evening, and we're going to be talking about the importance of the importance of spiritual living. And I think that this is a lot of good information that we will get tonight. It's interesting. Last Tuesday, we talked about healthy living and yoga and living holistically with your food and paying more attention to your body and learning your body. So I think tonight's conversation is perfect to now really dive more into that spiritual aspect. So I'm really excited about that. So again, tonight, the title is The Healing Power of Spiritual Living. I have Pam and Amina here that are going to break this down, and I will have a bio so that way you can have a little bit of background about them. So I will read that. So Pam and Amina, they will share with us how cultivating a spiritual lifestyle can help you on your healing journey. So if you have subscribed to the Healing Element Podcast, you follow my content, you know that it is all about healing from traumas that you have experienced and that you may have inherited. So with that being said, I would like to welcome Amina and Pamela to the Healing Element Podcast. So welcome, ladies.
Yay.
Thank you so much. So I am excited to have you here. I will say that a friend of mine had sent as I said, when we had initially met, a friend of mine had sent me your website. And I think you had made a post on Facebook or something. So she sent that to me and she's like, Kai, you got to check out the work that these two women are doing. And so I started following you on Instagram. And that's when I was like, oh my goodness, especially when I joined your live reading on Tuesday. That's when my mind was blown. So I will get into that. I got to say some of the goodies. So I want to get into that because that's when I was like, what? That's a juicy one. So I definitely want to talk about that. But first, I want to introduce our guests for this evening. So first, Amina Naru is the owner of Posh Yoga LLC in Wilmington, Delaware, and she's the co-founder of Retreat to Spirit. She's an active member of the Board of Directors for Accessible Yoga Association, past co-executive director of the Yoga Service Council, and works as a trauma-sensitive yoga teacher, wellness educator, mentor, and workshop facilitator. Amina served 3 terms as secretary for the YSC Board of Directors and is a contributing author of books Best Practices for Yoga with Veterans, YSC /Omega 2016, and Best Practices for Yoga in the Criminal Justice System, YSC /Omega 2017. She has served as the project manager for Yoga and Resilience, Empowering Practices for Survivors of Sexual Trauma, YSC /Omega, published by Handspring May 2020. She also was the project manager for Best Practices for Yoga with People with Addictions and Recovery. Her professional expertise is in the field of yoga services for communities, juvenile detention centers, and adult prisons. My staple got this out the way here. Okay. She is the first Black woman to implement curriculum-based yoga and mindfulness programs for juvenile detention centers in the state of Delaware. Welcome, Amina. You also have Pamela here. She is the founder and director of Yoga to Sleep, co-founder of Retreat to Spirit, an adjunct professor in yoga therapy, clinical supervisor at the Maryland University of Integrative Health. I've been looking at that program. So I've been looking at that one. She is a certified yoga therapist and meditation teacher with specialized certifications in plant-based nutrition, cognitive behavioral therapy, insomnia, and trauma-informed yoga to work with service members, veterans, their caregivers, and insomnia sufferers. Previously serving as a co-executive director of the Yoga Service Council, she cultivated financial resilience and strategic partnerships for the nonprofit organization. An avid yogi for over 20 years, Pamela was motivated to begin her teaching journey when she realized that yoga helped her sleep, decrease her insomnia, and reduced her knee osteoarthritis pain. Pamela has a MS in yoga therapy from Maryland University of Integrative Health and an MBA from University of Maryland University College. She served as president of the UMUC Alumni Association. In addition, she is a contributing editor of Best Practices for Yoga with Veterans, researcher and author of Yoga Therapy as a complementary modality for female veteran caregivers and with traumatic stress. A case study, Maryland University Integrative Health, March 2018. So if you guys are listening, you'll see that we have some people here that are well experienced in the field of not only of trauma, but also how you can use these different type yoga meditation to begin your healing journey from maybe if you experience PTSD or anything like that. And so all the work that they do centers around that spiritual living. So I just wanted to add this also with Pamela's work. She's worked for numerous agencies, including Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, the Veterans Administration, the Department of Labor as a yoga therapy intern for Johns Hopkins Medical Center, and as an advisor on Congress-supported publications centered on substance use, mental health, criminal justice, and military and veteran family matters. Her work and writing have been featured in Yoga Therapy, Military Gayam, Military Spouse Magazine, Yoga Journal, Mantra Yoga, and Health Essence, the Huffington Post, and on Ellen and MSNBC. Yes. So if you have any questions about yoga, you've come to the right place. That's what you all have learned. So I do want to dive into our conversation tonight as people start to join us. But first, I want to mention everyone that you guys right now are in the midst of doing a retreat. So I want to say thank you for that. I can't even imagine putting a retreat together, running a retreat, and then hopping on a podcast. So I wanted to know, would you mind sharing a little bit about the retreat that you're currently facilitating? And I know all of us wish that we could have gone, but can you tell us a little bit about that?
You want me to start?
Mm-hmm.
So actually, this retreat was running from the 16th to the 20th. Like we're on the other side of the retreat. So this was a retreat that we had put together last year and was tinkering on like, is it going to happen? Is it not going to happen? Is COVID going to take this, event away from us as well? But we were able to make it happen. So we're happy for that. But so what Pam and I do is help people, we support people in finding a spiritual lifestyle and living with more happiness and joy, right? So we do that with this retreat. It was focused on how can you, support a healthy well-being through your physical, spiritual, and mental aspects. We had a nice group that was so intimate and everyone got along with each other. And the first thing we get to or tackle in our retreats is the connections and, the connectivity and building community. So that happens right out the door. So the first couple of days is building community. And then we go into, the self-care aspects of a healthy living. And Pam, I'll let you jump in from there.
Yeah, so the next 2 days was healthy living. We talked about really self-care, taking care of yourself first, and then how that spills out into taking care of others, which can be termed community care. And so we talked about the science of self-care, the barriers of self-care, and we wrapped trauma in that, but in particular talked about moral injury, stress, overwhelm, intergenerational trauma, and things like that. Really getting into the meat of it once we set the tone for the community. We had about 10 people. And once we set the tone of everyone kind of gelling and sharing, then we dove into that aspect of it, which was interesting because when you always get to the barriers, and Kai, we've had these conversations before where we talked about the intergenerational trauma and people meeting their edges, getting to those challenges and kind of bumping up into the chaos that they are comfortable in, right? And then kind of how do we peel back the layers so that can kind of fall to the wayside, and you can then focus on what your purpose and passion is. So that's what we did for a week. We stayed for extra days to come down from all of that, because when you're holding space like that, it's lots of energy. Like Amina and I were like, man, we're so tired. And because of COVID, we haven't done any really work like this that hasn't been online. You know, we're in it for a week where we're holding space for the people that decided to, take the COVID test and get all the travel insurance and all of the things. So where we're staying in Blue Spirit, Sara, Costa Rica has really strict COVID protocols. We had to take a test before we come back into the U.S. They have been doing temperature checks, every day. You can't leave this property. You have to wear a mask. I mean, all of the things. It was actually better than being in the States. I mean, it was really, everyone was so worried about us coming. And I'm like, do you understand that they were so on point with their stuff because they really wanted open and then stay open. So it's been a wonderful journey, and we're planning to come back. So I think I'll pause there.
Yeah, we forgot to expound upon all of that gets wrapped up, and then you learn how to take it out into the world, into your leadership roles. So.
Mm-hmm. I absolutely love it. And so if those that are listening, make sure you give this video a thumbs up, subscribe and share, but also make sure you go to the website, and it's retreattospirit.com.
No, retreattospirit.today.
.today. Okay. So please, my apologies. So make sure you do that, or you can go to the description box, and that way you can see and just do a simple cut and paste. That's what I always do, just a cut and paste and then write in there. So that way you can sign up and keep abreast of when the dates are announced for the next retreat.
Awesome. January 2022.
Yes, I've marked my calendar because I was like, Costa Rica, yes, please.
Yes.
And the beauty of this retreat is, because we've been on retreats or workshops or weekends away, things like that before, right? And what we love so much about this is the personal time that's built into the schedule, So, we're spending some really intense time together as a group, but then you have the time before your next meal to, decompress, to go lounge at the pool, to walk to the beach, congregate with other folks in your group. And really just sit and download and journal, because we do a lot of journaling in our retreat.
No, I appreciate that. And there's one thing in particular that you said, and that is taking what you've learned when people attend your retreat, taking what you learn and then applying that to your life and using that in whatever space you're in, your leadership roles or whatever space you have. And I think that's so important when you're leaving a retreat, to take what you've learned and apply it. Because that means that you too, as the facilitators, that you created a program in which people learn how to do that. And so I think that's fabulous. And I love that. And that's one reason why I definitely want to attend your next retreat. And the other one is my personal story that I will share. It's very personal because it touches upon something I have not shared publicly, but I will tonight. Just because of the impact that had on my life. And I promise I'm not going to cry. But it was so profound. It was so profound. I was like, ah! So I appreciate that, just so that you two know, I can't tell you what that meant to me. So I will get to it. But since we're kind of talking about this whole spiritual living and what people are learning at the retreats and other workshops that you facilitate, can you explain to us, and we can maybe start off with Pam, when you are sharing with someone to live a spiritual lifestyle, for people that are just like, I don't know what they're talking about, what does that even mean? Can you kind of share with us what that means to you?
Well, it means to me, and how we kind of roll it into the work we do at Retreat to Spirit, is looking at the subtle aspects of our lives and ourselves and our bodies. So if we're using the standard, or one of the standard yogic principles would be Panchamaya koshas. So if we're looking at the koshas, we start with the body, and then we go to energetic breath, and then we're looking at the mind, emotions, wisdom body, and then we get to the bliss body, the spiritual aspect, our soul connection. And that's more subtle because it's harder for people, it's harder to get at that. And in working with people who are holding on, I'll say, to their current lifestyles as it relates to dogma, as it relates to trauma, as it relates to what they're comfortable in, as opposed to what may help them move them into their passion and their purpose, is where the rubber meets the road, I'll say, where the meat of what we do is. So this is not about, okay, I'm a Christian or I'm this and I have to give this up. This is not about a religious kind of doctrine or dogma. This is a spiritual and really ethereal journey that we can help you unpack and you can take yourself on. So this is also about empowerment. How do we empower you to discover that for yourself? How can you be empowered to remember who you truly are? Remembering who you are in the space of where we are today, where you are in your life, and discovering that for yourself. So that involves self-inquiry, self-reflection, that involves all the things, meditation, yoga, but whatever fits in for you. So these things can be individualized. For a workshop that we did, we've done a few workshops, like maybe a 2 or 3 hour workshop, we kind of touch on those things, those issues as it relates to yoga. And then we use different types of meditation, metta meditation, Ho'oponopono, some other types of meditation, or what the room calls for. So often, and Amina said this earlier, we had to see who showed up in the room. And then we called that kind of community from the energy that shows up in the room. So you can't just, man plans and God laughs. You can plan, but you never know who's going to come in the room, what type of energy they're bringing, what type of trauma they're bringing in the room, right? As that will come out in day 2, day 3, people will start uncovering and unpacking these things. And then it's really for me and Amina to hold the space and say, maybe we'll do this type of meditation. Maybe we'll do some breath work. Maybe we'll do some Kapalabhati. Maybe we need to get that energy up for a particular group. So it's really on a case-by-case basis. It's really concierge workshops and concierge retreats. Like we have to do it in that way to have this kind of container for each of the things that we offer, particularly the workshops.
Beautiful. And when you said that, Pam, it made me think of one, when I taught yoga, and also during my therapeutic yoga teacher training, where, of course, as a yoga teacher, you have your whole plan, right? So when a client comes in, you're like, okay, this is what we're going to do today. But one thing that my teacher said, she's like, you can have your plan, but when that body is in front of you, you have to make sure you know what that person needs. And you may have a bunch of, movement planned for that day, but that person actually needs to rest. So you really have to be in tune to pick up on those subtleties of what actually is needed for the people that are in front of you. So that's extremely powerful for what you just said.
Yes, absolutely.
And so did you want to add to that, Amina, about the living a spiritual lifestyle?
No,
that you both do?
No, she summed it up very well.
Okay. So it's so powerful. And that's the one thing, if you are in this healing space, as I have learned, I think you become very humble, because I think I can say this and let me know if I'm wrong. Like, we're probably 3 people that like to plan and have things pretty Like, this is what we're going to do. And when you're in this type of space, it's like, you can't, like, you can have it, but it doesn't mean you're going to necessarily use everything that you've planned out.
Right. So this reminds me of the difference of being a studio teacher versus, being a trauma-informed teacher. And I came out of a yoga studio that had a curriculum of 24 poses. So it was 24 poses and 2 rounds of breathing. So this was like a cookie cutter type of situation, right? All of the teachers were taught the same poses, same curriculum, same style of teaching, this stationary sequence. So, people would show up and present in different ways, right? And if you are not a skilled teacher or have been educated in any type of trauma or emotional intelligence, your class could go totally left, right? Which I have seen a few times, been on the mat as a student and, watched teachers struggle, as, students are having emotional breakthroughs or breakdowns on their mat, or situations of, like prejudice, racial injustice is happening right in front of the teacher. And it's like, how do people in the teaching role, the leadership, like maneuver that? What do you do? But when I came out of being a studio teacher and got more training and went into teaching for the jails and detention centers, it was critical to know how to address bickering in the room or, people's traumas, the symptoms of trauma showing up. And you can't go in there with, oh, this is the curriculum. This is what I'm going to do today. This is my container. And whatever happens, I'm going to bulldoze through with this container. You end up causing more harm, or your whole class just gets shut down. And it could even mean that you lose the opportunity to even bring these services and healing modalities into such populations.
No, that's so true. And please let me know if you agree with this. And I definitely want to hear more about your stories that kind of led you to where you are now. But what you are both describing about needing to kind of be not fixed, but able to adjust and kind of see how you need to show up depending on what's in front of you. To me, that is spiritual living. Like there's not like that structure, must do this at 5, it's more like, how do I need to show up right now for me first? Then I can, work on how I need to show up for others. So could you share with us a little bit about your journey, your spiritual journey that led you to where you are right now? And any of you, whoever wants to start off.
Well, what happened? So my spiritual journey happened in kind of like chunks, but I'll get to the part because I was just thinking, like, I feel like I've always been a spiritual person as far as like, having compassion for other people to the point where, I'm a teenager going home and holding space for the death of my best friend. Her brother got killed. He got hit by a Mack truck at like 5 years old. And I remember that being so profound for me. Like, oh my God, it felt like my brother. It felt like my family member. And I had such a lamenting feeling with that. And I was like, I don't even know what this is or why this is. But that let me know that I probably was empathic, right? So just going from there and coming out of the church and, how religion played a strong part in my family and finding my own way of worshiping or my own path, which led to this spiritual journey. prayer was big for me, which later turned into meditation and prayer, or prayer and meditation, whichever comes first for you. But and then I had had an issue with when the sun goes down at like 4:30 on the East Coast. So I went to the doctor and I was diagnosed with SAD, seasonal affective disorder, which pretty much said to me was depression. It was seasonal and it was incapacitating. Like I couldn't go to work. I wasn't able to be a mother. I was a wife. All my roles were put on hold, until this thing passed. And the doctor wanted to prescribe medication. I tried the medication. I didn't like how it worked. I discovered yoga through a DVD and I started doing it at home. Then I was like, this is different. I feel different. Like I got the DVD just to stretch after running or walking, because that was also became part of my spiritual lifestyle. Like the walking, I was connecting to, divine and universe through that. So after I had that DVD and I realized that I feel better. Like I don't need to take medicine this winter. I got some DVDs, gave it to all my friends. Somebody let me know about a yoga studio in the area. And I started going. And once I started going, I knew that this was something I wanted to share with my people. This is something that I wanted to give back to other people who were experiencing depression or emotional imbalances and things like that. I started volunteering at the detention center, and a whole new career sparked for me. And that was 2012. I graduated teacher training in 2011. So by 2012, I was volunteering and went into a whole new career path with teaching at detention centers and jails. So that's part of my spiritual journey, with some other things that were weaved in and out.
Wow, thank you for sharing. It's so interesting because when I meet other people that are in this type of space of wellness, it usually comes out of like a challenging period. And then they find that something, whether it's yoga, meditation, that helps to get them out of it. And they're like, I want to share this with other people, because we always know someone around us that is going through the same thing or has gone through the same thing. So we just want to share like with them that, this isn't a sentence, like you can get your life back. So thank you for sharing with that and sharing that with us, Amina. And Pam, could you share with us your story?
Yes, I'll try to do the abbreviated version. So it's funny because Amina and I started our businesses at 2012. I think we realized that at some point. And I didn't really think I was going to teach yoga. Like I had been taking it. I initially started at, I believe, a community center when my then, my sister-in-law, before she was my sister-in-law, was like, let's do some things together, And we went to this thing, and I remember thinking, man, I don't like Shavasana, but the stretching was good. I remember having this kind of weird feeling. But then I kept going. There were more studios in the DC metro area. I kept going to different studios. I had I'll say, a few bad experiences as it relates to Black people, Black bodies showing up to yoga studios. And I could have let that kind of derail my journey. But I knew it felt good, and I knew that this wasn't something that was just acclimated to this one studio that was making money off of it, et cetera. Like I knew it was bigger than that because I felt it in my body. So I kept on and then got some good yoga teachers that I still connect with to this day, and got trained and started working towards veterans or their families or service members. And that I kind of fell in that. So it's really, I'm trying to pinpoint like when that happened, because that wasn't a plan. And I was thinking, okay, my husband was injured. He was in the Army, and I just was always doing work with some nonprofits in the area of military families and that kind of thing. So it kind of fell into that because I had those relationships already cultivated that I was actually continuing to cultivate. So I had taught yoga in American Legion lodges. I was trying to kind of get to the VA at that time, and I had plenty of doors slammed in my face. So I want to just tell your audience that this wasn't something that I just walked into and immediately got contracts and was working with veterans and military families, nonprofits. Like, it took a minute because, at that time people were not as, accepting, I'll say, of yoga. And I think there were some other barriers related to my status, sex, race, all of that. I actually think that was a barrier. Or barriers to entry. But I persevered because I am that person. I'm not going to give up. And so I did that. And Amina and I met about 6 years ago on the campus of Omega and connected immediately. And we were doing our thing. She's working with incarcerated juveniles and adults. I'm working with veterans, military families, and service members, right? So the yoga as service piece we were already doing it. Like, there's a name now for it, but I was already working in the community, providing these services and with some nonprofits and quasi-government entities, right? So that was my journey. Plus, I was a recovering insomniac, and I'm still recovering. I mean, I say that. And I love naps, and I love talking about sleep, and I love talking about rest and restoration. So that's why I came up with Yoga to Sleep, because I feel like not enough of us are getting sleep, and yoga has the tools for that. And yoga is more than asanas. You can use breath, you can use intention, you can use meditation, you can use yamas and niyamas, whatever, to affect change so that you can get better sleep, better quality sleep. So that's my journey in a nutshell. I've done a lot of other stuff, but that's pretty much, I'll stop there.
No, that's great, because I think it's beautiful for those that are listening live. And if you are listening live, if you have any questions or comments, please make sure you just drop that in the comment section, so that way we can bring it up to our guest tonight. And so just let us know if you have any thoughts about what we're talking about so far, if there's something that you want to bring into the conversation. But I think it's so important providing that background so that way people kind of know the experiences that you've had, what kind of led you here, because some people could think, oh, my life is totally in shambles. I don't know the first step in trying to get on a spiritual journey. So I think having that background just helps people connect. So I appreciate you sharing that with us. And I know that when we read through your bio, a lot of the work that you have done has been in the in trauma recovery. So could you share with us a little bit, and Amina, we could start with you. Could you share with us a little bit of how, I guess, what happens to our spirit when we experience trauma? So how does that, the impact that has on us? So you guys are listening, please pay close attention to everything we're saying, but especially if you have experienced something traumatic, please make sure you're listening in on this.
Sorry, I'm muted. I was muted. It's through my journey and experience with trauma. I am the daughter of heroin addicts. I was sexually abused as a child. I have childhood sexual trauma, in my background and my experiences. So I just wanted to say that the depression was the root was linked there. Okay. Now, the symptoms, the evidence of the root was depression, irritation, rage, anger, low self-esteem, all of these things that I kind of took as, well, this is just how I am. And it was when I started meditating and having that physical movement of the yoga practice that things started peeling back. In Shavasana, or, the last pose, which is your resting posture, dead man's pose, I would just weep. Tears would just stream down my face. I would actually be holding a pose like Warrior Two or in a back bend, and tears would just stream down my face. No idea why. Sometimes I would get a little glimpse of a memory that I just had to piece with the emotion and say, oh my God, like that's that coming up. So yoga, the physical asana practice, opens you up in that way because the issues are in the tissues, as our colleague Nikki Myers teaches us. So what trauma does is it causes a dissociation from your physical body, right? So if something happens to the house where you live in, right? If somebody breaks into your house, you probably will not go back and feel safe in your house again, right? So that's what happens when we experience trauma, and we can disassociate, meaning we focus more on things outside of ourselves, like, material things, other people's business, other people, meaning relationships, then codependency creeps in. These are all the things that happen with people who experience trauma. I had to learn that before I began working on my own trauma healing, that my brain had been wired differently because of the trauma. So, people show up in life so wonderfully, right? In their work, they, lead these positions. You see them out in the world doing things and, functioning like healthy adults. However, when you experience trauma, it causes your neural pathways to take different routes than someone who has not experienced trauma, right? So, the decisions that people who are experiencing trauma make in their personal life would not be the same decisions that someone who has not experienced trauma makes. So, we often grow up to be adults who, have a lot of resentment or feel like victims, right? So there's this thing called like the soul. Pieces of the soul become fragmented, and those parts of your soul or spirit get stuck in those situations of trauma, right? And when we grow up to be adults, we may appear to be emotionally unstable in personal relationships, right? And that's what trauma does to us. So we need to find modalities that work for you. So for me, meditation and yoga were the keys for me to start going back and pulling the pieces of my soul and spirit back to myself, calling those parts of me back to myself for healing.
Wow, thank you for sharing, Amina. It's super powerful. And Pam, I'd want to get your thoughts on this too, as far as trauma and how it affects the spirit as well. I did want to mention, I was having a conversation with another yoga teacher that's trauma informed, and we were talking about trauma, and we're saying how there's always this push for people to go to therapy, and I'm not knocking therapy at all, but it was interesting because we were saying that there's many pathways for people to begin their healing process. And so I was sharing with her, I said, when something traumatic happens to your person, you could, as you said, Amina, want to kind of remove yourself from your own body, but you can't. So you kind of shut down. So you don't allow yourself to really feel, perhaps. And I said, I think yoga meditation is a beautiful step for you to become, almost begin to learn your body again and feel comfortable. And I wonder if yoga and therapy, I think that could potentially work beautifully together if that's someone's path, because to be able to be in your body and feel when maybe you decided to someone who went through trauma decided to shut down because they're like, I don't want to feel, I just want to be numb. To go to a therapist and talk to a therapist, the therapist like, well, how did you feel about this? Because I'm fine. Like, because they're so disconnected from themselves. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. It does make sense. And I would say that people shut down, but they're also looking through the various types of trauma, because there's so many different types of trauma, that they are often searching for feeling. That's why you have addictions, for instance. People are trying to feel. That's why people may be anorexic. That's why people may have teenagers who cut themselves. Like there's, you know, those are just examples of, I really don't know why I'm doing this or whatever, but I'm really trying to feel something, because there's this void, there's this thing that I'm trying to fill, this hole that I'm trying to fill. And I may not know what that is. I believe that therapy can help, and they're complementary. So we need to look at these alternative and complementary modalities that we know of as complementary. So for instance, if you're doing therapy with a good therapist, right? Not someone saying, so how do you feel today? You know, somebody that's really going to get to the stuff. And you have a powerful pranayama practice and meditation practice, for instance. Say you don't even do asana, but the pranayama is moving some energy through, and that's working. That may be something for one person, you know, who may have experienced, you know, post-traumatic stress disorder. Let's just take that. Then there may be something else where somebody may need a heavy asana practice. So it could be, there's myriad choices. So I'll say this, and one of our mentors, we have some great mentors, and one of our mentors, I had a discussion about this idea of soul injury. Amina touched on it a little bit without saying soul injury, because can the soul really be injured? So there's a query for you. We can discuss. But the military had coined this term moral injury, right? And Amina and I roll that into a lot of the work that we're doing, because that comes from having to do something that you are morally against. It's something in your spirit saying, you shouldn't be doing this, but you do it anyway. And that what happens behind the thing that you do, what happens in lieu of that if you don't do it, right? Like how do, you know, the choices that you make around moral injury, which is also leading to burnout and that kind of thing. And so therefore the spirit can be withdrawn when we have these experiences. So I would say that when we are talking about trauma as it relates to the spirit, we can't just conjure up, I'll say, the damage without having a full-on container or somebody experienced in trauma-informed yoga, therapy, whatever the thing is, to be able to hold the space for that person. That's something that I believe doesn't have to be this daunting thing, but also you need to be trained in it. So I'll say this, and this is not for or against any type of therapy, but the clients that I've had one-on-one who were veterans, who were dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder, military sexual trauma, traumatic brain injury, any combination thereof, came to me and said, I have had cognitive behavioral therapy and it didn't work for me. And it was at least 5 or 6 people that I can think of off the bat. Does cognitive behavioral work? If you look at the research, it works tremendously. Why didn't it work with my clients? I don't know. What I do know is that when they started unpacking that stuff, because cognitive behavioral therapy is pulling that stuff up, and they had to talk about getting blown up or whatever, they started having nightmares again, or whatever their sexual trauma was. They revisited the thing, and then they stopped. There could be, so you could say, well, they should have continued through. Maybe they would have come out on the other side, or why did they stop? If you don't feel safe in the container being held, right, by the person delivering the service, delivering the treatment, delivering the medicine to help you be empowered, you're not going to stay with it. That, to me, is beyond credentials and accreditation. That's when you have to really be authentic and see yourself in the other person, right? I got cognitive behavioral therapy training for insomnia. So let me just get that out the way. I got that training. I may use some of it, but I have to show up fully and authentically in seeing the person that I'm serving, or the group of wounded warrior caregivers, for instance, in front of me as I see myself. I have to believe that, and I have to embody it. That requires that I have a practice, that I'm working on my own triggers and traumas, that I'm doing my work so that I can have that container. I don't know that every therapist is doing that. I don't know that every yoga teacher can do it. That's the crux of what Amina and I are trying to do with Retreat to Spirit, is really allow people to remember who they are through that hard work. And it's a slow process. People want to get enlightenment like this. I mean, Kai, you had this. It doesn't work that way. If you've been doing this half of your life and you want to get enlightened in 3 weeks, yeah, nobody, you can't do it. You can't. So.
No, I think it's so true. And I want to mention, I don't remember if I shared it, Pam, with you and Amina when we had spoke offline, but I read Dr. Gail Parker's book. I'm going to say it wrong. It's using yoga for racial trauma. And I apologize. I will put the name of the book in the title. I loved her book. I appreciate it so much. And it's interesting, the part when you were talking about healing, Pam, because there's a part where she talks about when the Western therapist had went to Rwanda to do some therapy work with people that had suffered through the genocide. And so they were like taking people into separate rooms and having them retell their story. And a few of the folks that were there who were, from Rwanda, like, what are you doing? Where are you taking these people? And they're like, oh, we're taking them over here to this room. They're like, you're gonna take them away from community into a room by themselves to relive what they experienced? No. They're like, how we are doing healing is we're doing it outside, and we're doing it in nature. We want them to touch the earth. We want them to touch the grass. We want them to see the tree, see the sun. We want the drum beat. We want music. We want them to feel community. And when I read that, I was like, are we doing this wrong? It was just like, because when I read that, it resonated with me. And I was like, that actually makes more sense to me. Now, I don't have a background in therapy. I'm just going by what resonated with me. I was like, that makes more sense to me in a community, obviously, that you have built. So there's a level of trust there. And then you're like, okay, you need to ground yourself, touch the grass, touch the earth. I was like, that makes more sense than taking someone to a room by themselves and say, okay, now what happened on such and such a day?
Absolutely. It's the ground. It's like connecting with nature. What did Amina say earlier when she was figuring this out for herself, when she was doing that kind of journey, that voyage of self-discovery? I'm walking so I can connect with the divine. So what does that mean? I'm moving in presence. What does that mean when I love to lay in the grass? I want to touch nature. I want to be outside. I want to connect. I want to get vitamin D from the sun. This is who we are. And when we remove that, and that's part of us being nature. Right? So we say we're a part of nature. No, we are nature. We are natural. We are nature. And the problem is, one of the problems is that we've gotten away from that. So we try to do things over here, pull back to this thing. So we as a society, I believe, and particularly I think COVID has illuminated, but I think we were on that path anyway, moving back towards this natural, moving back towards indigenous ways, ancestral ways, honoring our ancestors. So that drumming is going to cause movement. And what's going to happen when you cause that movement and you have your tribe chanting and singing at you, and all that stuff is coming up, and you having a breakdown and have breakthroughs over and over again. That's the way that is being rediscovered and reignited.
Yeah, I can't agree with you more. And I think that's so beautiful, because then also you don't feel isolated, right? If you're in a room with somebody and you're just there by yourself, that therapist could be there, but you could still feel very alone. And like now you already maybe felt alone when you experienced the trauma. Now you have to do it again by yourself, as opposed to being in that whole community where people maybe had a shared experience that can hold you, comfort you, say whatever words need to be said. I think that is so much more powerful. And I'm so happy the work that you and Amina are doing that. So that way we can start to promote this type of healing more, because I really believe that this is that mind, body, soul, spirit healing, the work that you two are doing. For sure. And so for those that are listening, again, please make sure you share this video. I'm telling you, this information can really help folks that are looking for answers, and just, maybe just with the that COVID situation that has happened, that can have people stressed out even more. And maybe I don't like to use the word triggering, but for lack of a better word, maybe it could be triggering a little bit, just maybe being isolated at home, or who knows who they're home with. So please do share this information. It is important, and make sure that you check out Retreat to Spirit today. Make sure you go to their website, so that way you can definitely connect with the work that they're doing. So I do want to, oh my gosh, I'm looking at time. I could talk to you, lady. I could talk to you forever. I'm like, I lost track of time. So for those really quick that are listening today, and maybe they've experienced some type of trauma, and they're like, you know what, the spirit, what you've said today is resonating with them. And they're like, but what's the first step that I can take? I don't even know where to start. Pam, what would you recommend for them to do?
One thing that they could start doing is looking at any type of contemplative practice that they have and maybe tweaking it. So for instance, if you are a yoga teacher and you want to kind of share this, but you're still going through your own stuff, right? You're still trying to figure it out, and you're still working with some perhaps trauma that happened when you were a teenager. What can you change and shift? Is the asana too much, or can you kind of pull back and maybe do breath work, or maybe you need to be still? So sometimes the movement needs to be shifted and changed, and the movement may need to be breath movement, and then maybe you need to be still. So that requires interoceptive awareness. That requires going inside the body, becoming aware of sensations in the body. And to do that, often we have to be still. And a lot of times we don't want to be, especially if we're a vinyasa yoga teacher. We don't want to be still. I'm going to keep moving. I'm going to do the thing. Inhale, exhale, come into chaturanga. Can you pause and see what's in the pause, right? Can you notice what's going on in your heart and mind and body? If you have lower back issues, for instance, often you haven't done anything to your lower back. Often that's stress, and that's some stuff going on. And that's some stuff that you've done this to. So I would say interoceptively become aware, and then maybe shift your contemplative work.
And Amina, would you like to add to that?
Well, just thinking outside of yoga, right? Because a lot of folks, aren't going to journey to a yoga class or start doing a yoga practice. But Pam said the breath. Now that is the first thing I would tell somebody, to just start sitting with your breath, connecting to your breath, noticing your regular, normal breathing. Just start there. Just notice how you breathe, how your body supports you on a daily basis with breath, bringing awareness to that. And then after holding space, it's meditative, really, right? Watching the breath. But then you can start implementing some of the breath work, which is, deep breaths. How many years have we heard? I mean, before yoga, I heard people say, "Oh, just take a deep breath or do 10 deep breaths to calm down." I didn't know at the time that was part of a yoga practice, but yeah, implementing that breath to let the energy move out and flow, right? Because oftentimes we're tight and we're holding on to an emotion. Sometimes we don't even realize that we're holding on to something, right? But, as soon as we start doing some deep breathing, at least as soon as you get to like 3 or 5, you may start to notice that your shoulders come out of your ears. I'm just spoken for myself, really. Your shoulders start to come out your ears. You're like, oh gosh, I didn't even know, right? I walk around like this all day. Like I got shoulders for earrings. People don't even realize it. Right. Mm-hmm. And then, and then once you do the focus on your breath and then the deep breathing, just sit, just start sitting in just space and silence. Right. All of these things are going to start to come up in your head, but you're just creating a container for yourself to just be, because we're always going, we're doing something. Right. But this is the start of a spiritual practice, because in that space that you're providing for yourself, other things will come up, other sensations will come up that will lead you to the next thing you can do to be spiritual. Like, you might start getting an epiphany to go outside and place your hands on a tree. I started doing this and people were looking like, what's that lady doing? But, when I would take my walks, I would just stop and place my hands on a tree. And there is some communication that was happening, right? And a transfer of energy, right? Nature is here to help and support us. So, I'm feeling stressed out or angry. Mm-hmm. I asked the tree, I'm actually communicating with the tree, like, can you help transmute this energy? And then you keep on going. Now, when you get back to wherever you're going to is when you start to feel like, wow, like something took place. When you have that, create that time for you to sit in silence and stillness, again, you will notice that, something did transpire. But we can tell you all the different tools to use or to try, but really it depends on the person and what speaks to them, and the way to get the answers, what worked for me to get my answers was sitting in stillness, noticing, tuning back to my body through the breath, and opening up a journal and writing what was coming up for me. And then, you get these questions of why this or why that. Write it down, write it in your journal, write the question down, close your book, go to sleep. Notice what comes up for you the first thing in the morning. Write that down. Notice what you dreamed about, write it down. So that is part of a practice that can help you develop your own spiritual practice.
No, I appreciate that. And it's so true. One thing that you said, that's one of the gentlemen, his name is Neely Fuller, and his work has taught me a lot about the system we live in. And he always says, if you ask the universe a question, you will get an answer. And so what you said, just kind of write it down. And it's not like, now, when is it going to come to me? It's just write it down, and it will definitely, that answer will come to you for sure. And I've experienced that personally. So I know that we're running on the end of time. I just wanted to really quick share a personal story of my connection to you two. And then I definitely want to know if you have any last words, and also for people that want to connect to you, how they can find you on social media. So, so this had to be, I think, during the summer that this, no, what are we in? This was last year? I think this was last year. I don't know, it's a blur. But this happened, I'll put it that way. So Pam and Amina, they do every Tuesday at 11:11. You go live.
Eastern time.
Eastern Standard Time. And so I have seen the pop up that they go live. And for some reason, I was really drawn to join this live session. I had no expectation. I just was like, oh, I'll join live and see what's going on. So I must say, prior to me going live, my fiance and I, we were having conversations about having children again. And we have many reasons why we have said no, which a lot of it is just the state of our society and our concern with bringing little brown babies into the world and what will their life be like. And so that has caused us to say, like, well, if we do want to have children, do we want to have them here? Like, what would their life be like? So those are some of the concerns. And also for me personally, with being told by my doctor and a few other doctors that I would not be, if I had children, it would be hard for me to carry full term. So all of that kind of goes into, and I've never said this probably to many people in my family, nor on a broadcast. So here it is. So that's kind of the stuff in the background. So my fiance and I, Dwayne, we were having conversations with a gentleman that has become very close to us. And he's like, I see, I think that you guys may have, I think you may have a little bundle. I see that in your life. And we're looking at each other like, no. We said no. So that's that happened, right? Fast forward to the live, right? So I get on live, no expectations. And I think what started off was it Pam that you were pulling the cards?
Well, we were both. I'm trying to remember.
Somebody pulled a card about a woman.
Pam had a dream. I had a conversation about Pam's dream. She had a dream somebody was pregnant or something.
Yeah. Okay, and then you pulled the card then. There was some card that was representative of like woman and was it like mother and all like, right?
Yeah.
So I get on and so it was like the card was pulled and it was about this kind of like a mother. Was that it? Like a mother type of person or energy, I guess I should say. And then Pam had the dream and they're like, somebody on here is either pregnant or going to get pregnant, like all this pregnancy talk. So I was like, what? and the other part to that is days before going on this live, I had this India Ari kick and I'm still on this kick, right? And I don't know where this came. I love India Ari, but for some reason I was listening to her like she was a new artist that just came out. I could not stop playing her music. And so I think Pam said you had a dream that there's a woman or something at a lounge and they were listening to India Ari. And this was all tied into this woman who was either pregnant or going to be pregnant.
It's coming back. It's coming back. She was pregnant. It was dark in the lounge. Yeah, I remember it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm up there about to bawl. I'm like, these ladies, like, I was just like, oh, like, there's so much that you were saying that was private conversations that we were having, like trying to figure stuff out. And it was like on live, like it was real time what was happening. And I didn't share with you until the end. So it wasn't like I was feeding you information. We didn't know. Right. So y'all, if you want some truth, go to Tuesday, 11:11. It was such a blessing to me. It was a confirmation to me. And I think it's just a testament that the work that you are doing is real. It's not something out there somewhere, but you are really doing spiritual work and, for lack of a better term, God's work. So I appreciate you deeply. I can't tell you how much that moment impacted me, because I think I needed the little push that this could happen. And that's what you guys gave to me. So I wanted to publicly thank you for that.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you.
So let me move on before I start crying. So as we round up our conversation tonight, Pam and Amina, if people that are listening and they want to contact you, what is the best way that they can do that? And please also include your social media information.
They can contact us at retreattospirit.today. That's our website, and we've actually revamped it, so check it out. We have an email, retreat2spirit@gmail.com. We're also on Instagram at retreat2spirit. I have an Instagram for my business, yoga, 2 sleep. And we have a private Facebook group also. So you can just apply, or I think you have to click on it to just be accepted into our private Facebook group where we talk about some things. We'll have some questions, queries, put some prompts there for consideration and self-reflection. So yeah. And then Amina will give her information.
And we also have a yoga journal course. So we did a 6-week course for yoga for self-care. And you can find that at yogajournal.com. We also have a leadership workshop coming up specifically for Black women who want to, dive into their self-care, take some tools and tips into their everyday life and their leadership positions. And you can find that registration at bemoreempowered.org. That's MOREEMPOWERED.org. Be More Empowered. There are scholarships available. If you're watching this, you need to get in on it now because that's coming up next week. That workshop starts February, I think it's February 6th or something like that.
Fourth.
The 3rd, sorry.
4th.
Okay, February 4th. So we're super excited about that. What else? You can, Pam already gave you Instagram. We have our own individual profiles as well. Pam is at Yoga to Sleep on Instagram and Facebook. I am under Posh Yoga, POSH Yoga. Also Amina Naru. You can find me on under that handle as well. I don't think we forget anything, right?
Patreon. We're on Patreon. We have a few Patreon members. We have a couple of tea times there. So yeah, join us on Patreon.
And look out for the next Costa Rica trip.
Yes. I'm excited. And so I will make sure I will add your different Instagrams and all of that to the description box. So that way people will be able to have that. And also the link to the upcoming workshop. So I'll make sure that I add all of that to the description box after after the episode tonight. So with that being said, I would like to thank you. I know I held you over. I was like, we get over at either 45 minutes or an hour, and here we are over time. But I appreciate you so much for taking time to have a conversation with me. For those that are listening or watching, please make sure you visit my website, kaimarie.com, to learn more about my services and to learn more about the Healing Element podcast. We're rounding the last episode for season 2. So please make sure you join me next Tuesday. That will actually be the last episode for season 2. So make sure you join me Tuesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time right here. I'd like my guests to stay on for one moment as we end this broadcast. I hope you all have a great evening, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.